Welcome and welcome back. With this project, I'm going to take this 6x6x10 piece of lumber with additional 2x4s and create a desk for additional workspace for our home. This is a model that I put together of the desk using model balsa wood. It's a pretty standard design, but what I wanted to do is a couple of changes just to give it a little bit easier maneuverability, let's say, if you want to take it apart and move it from one place to another. So what I wanted to do was have, using hardware, you'll be able to take off the cross member, and then the legs will be separate pieces that'll have slots that go into the top. Now with this model, I figured I would have a couple of extra edge pieces just for design, but the final piece will just have the main structural pieces to locate the legs and not the finishing pieces, but I think it looks great as a finished product. And once we have our legs located, we can put our structural support in. And then we'll have our desk concept. To begin, I'm going to cut two sections roughly 30 inches each off this 10-foot 6x6 that will later become my legs. Then we'll run these through the planer to remove the rough sawn texture for a smoother finish. We'll then take the leg pieces over to the table saw and cut them into two sections. Then I'm going to take the remaining 5-foot section of the 6x6 and run that through the planer to remove the rough sawn texture as well. Back at the table saw, we're going to cut that 5-foot section into planks that will become our top. After making the rough cuts, I'm going to equip the table saw with a higher tooth blade to clean up the edges for a smoother glue up. I'm going to use wood dowels and glue to assemble the top, so I'm going to use this wood doweling jig to drill the holes. This is a view of the top and the way the pieces are arranged before I glued them together. Once the top was glued together, it was just a quick cut with the circular saw to clean up the ends. To get the angles I needed to cut for my cross members, I did not stress on dead accuracy. For this, I didn't rely on angles and gauges of tools. I honestly just made marks off of my project to mark my cuts. Using that same method, I'm going to lay out my cross member pieces so that I can mark my half lap joints that will need to be cut. To cut the half lap joints on my cross members, I will be using my table saw. But to make it easier for myself, I'm going to use the miter saw to grab the angle off the marked piece and then transfer that to a scrap piece of material that I can use for my sled to make the cuts. The scrap piece I used happened to be a piece of MDF where all the corners had 90-degree angles. With our piece cut, let's move to the table saw. Now that we have our piece to transfer our angle cut, we'll just need our cross member and our table saw sled in order to make this cut. I'm going to use a clamp to hold this piece in place just to demonstrate a little bit easier of how this is able to transfer my angle. All right, let's get this flipped around while still trying to avoid the camera so we can take a look at our marks. Once the height of the table saw blade was adjusted, I cut my first half lap joint in my cross member. I did not take the time to change out the standard table saw blade to a dado blade to make these cuts. I opted instead just to make multiple passes until the width of my cut was made. To cut the half lap on the opposing cross member, I just flipped a piece in order to make the cut. Once my pieces were cut, I took them over to the routing table to refine the sharp corners to smoother edges for a nicer feel. Here are the legs for the desk, and they'll go together with two side pieces, a top and a bottom, and then two cross members. So they'll go together something like this. And then when assembled, they will have a little bit of a gap, but I'm going to take advantage of that to use location pieces on the underside of the top to locate my legs. This is our desktop upside down, and these are the pieces that I've added to help locate and support my legs. On the legs, the top will have a little bit of an offset that'll help lock into these pieces. We can set one leg in there. Then we will do the same with the other. Here's a closer view of how the leg attaches to the top. Once the leg is in its slot, I added two screws that will secure the top to the leg. These are the back brace cross supports. They're just 2x4's that I've cut, and I have a channel here cut both exactly the same on these pieces, but once they overlap, I'll create my X for my back support. Now here's all the pieces put together with our prototype on top to see what our desk looks like before being finished. And here's our new desk after being stained and finished. With this concept, the thought was that this would be the furthest anyone would have to disassemble this desk in order to move it to a new preferred location all by oneself. Once we have the legs in the correct positions, we'll attach the back supports. Each back support is held on with two bolts. The 4 bolts used to attach the back braces I will not fully tighten upside down. I'll wait till I flip the desk to tighten to give the desk its rigidity. The last pieces of hardware are going to be 2 screws per leg to attach the top to the leg. With our desk flipped and settled in, I can tighten the 4 bolts to lock everything in place. After tightening our 4 bolts, assembly is complete. Our finishing touch will be our covers for our cord management through our desk. I appreciate you taking the time to watch my video. Thank you and have a great day.